The votes are in and it's time for the craft challenge to begin. Hi everyone, it's Chrissy from First Day of Home. You know how sometimes you can't resist buying a craft supply, but then it just sits in a drawer or a cabinet somewhere and you kind of forget about it? Well, today I'm teaming up with my friends at Sustain My Craft Habit to do a craft with what you've got challenge. I put this poll up on my YouTube channel and you voted on the items that I would use for this craft challenge. The first item was this set of terracotta flower pots that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I've done a lot of decoupage flower pots and other flower pot crafts in the past, so I thought this might be a good idea. Next was this reversible chalkboard sign. I'm not even sure why I originally picked this up, but it's in my craft stash. Then I dug through my bin of random craft supplies, and eventually, after weeding through a few things like pine cones and a tumbler, I found these mini vases that I had picked up for $3 at Target Dollar Spot. And I thought it would be fun to embellish these with some air dry clay, which I also already had. The last item was a candle making set that I received as a Christmas gift a few years ago, and it comes with everything you need to make scented candles. After collecting your votes, it was clear you wanted to see some more air dry clay projects, so let's get crafting with these mini vases. I wasn't sure what I wanted to sculpt, so I started with a few inspiration photos like this daisy and this really pretty vine with flowers and leaves. I also had these clay cutters that I've never used before, so I thought maybe I could try those on some of the vases as well. Since I have really different shapes here, I thought it might be useful just to sketch out some ideas of what designs I wanted to make. And this was really tough because I've never done any air dry clay sculptures or accents on ceramic, so this will be a first for me. I was surprised that once I unwrapped these, I found that the vases were really shiny like a regular ceramic. For some reason, I thought they were matte. So I'm going to paint them first, and then I'll use some acid-free glue to attach the air dry clay. I've never done this before, so we're going to find out if it works. I'm going to start with a neutral color palette using some creams and then bring in a little bit of teal and mint color, which will match my craft room. I found that since the surface is glossy, it helps to use a matte paint with this type of project. I ended up repainting the first vase here because I didn't like the yellowish tinge to it, and I really want all of these three vases to feel like they are part of a group. For the tall vase, I used the same cream on top and then added a stripe in the middle with this lighter shade of green to kind of get an ombre effect. For the third vase, I wanted to experiment with another craft supply that I've had for a while. It's terrazzo flakes, and it's supposed to give the vase sort of a stone look, so I thought it'd be fun to try that as the base. So as you can see, I'm applying a glue first that comes with this terrazzo kit, and then I'm just sprinkling on some of these flakes. They're almost like the texture of an eggshell, or they're actually paint chips. And I really love the texture this gives. I think it just adds a little more character or charm to this vase. And then once we're done, I'm going to leave some space to add a flower with air dry clay. I'm going to apply a top coat to seal everything in place. Then once this is drying, I'll start with my first air dry clay accent on the first vase. Now that the paint has dried, it's time to start working on the vine for the first vase. Again, this was my inspiration drawing for this vase, but I'm not going to copy it exactly. It's just going to give me some inspiration as a starting point. As you can see, I've used this package of clay just a few times, and if you've missed some of my prior air dry clay videos, I'll put some here that I think you might enjoy. So this clay is still perfectly good, but it does dry out a little bit over time, so I'm going to go ahead and add some water and start kneading the clay just to make sure that it's moist throughout. Once it's fairly moist, I'm going to start rolling it into a snake just by using my hands, and then I'll use my work surface as well. I've finally rolled out my snake of clay here, and it's a little bit difficult with this brand of air dry clay to get a super thin strand because it starts drying and cracking. So I'm going to have a fairly thick vine here, but I think it's going to look good in the end. I'm going to go ahead and wrap my vine around the vase, and I have a rough design in mind, but I'm using this acid-free glue to make sure that my rope of clay is not going to shift on me. And this is a really great technique that you can use when you're working with clay on a surface that is something other than clay. So I'm just going to add a strand of glue here and work my way around the vase. Since thin pieces of clay sometimes have a tendency to crack, I'm just adding moisture as I work my way around to make sure that the cracking is minimal. I love adding a little bit of extra detail, so I'm taking some of my tools here to make it look more like a true vine. Next, I'm rolling out some pieces of clay to make leaves coming off of the vines, and I'm just going to freestyle these leaves. I don't have a leaf clay cutter, but if you have one, or if you want to make one out of thin metal, you can certainly do that. After making these rough cuts, I'm just going to smooth out the clay using a bit of water until they reach a leaf shape that I'm happy with. After I've shaped my leaves, I'm going to attach them to the vine using some of that acid-free glue. I'm not following any specific pattern here, I'm just randomly attaching them above and below the vine. I'm also using some of my tools as I go to add extra details like the veins in the leaves. Now that my vine and leaves are done, it's time to add some flowers. As I mentioned earlier, I bought these clay cutters to make flowers, and I actually had the idea of using them for polymer clay earrings. And I've been dying to experiment more with polymer clay because it's just a little more elastic and you can do some other interesting projects with it. So let me know down in the comments if you would be interested in seeing some crafts with polymer clay. These clay cutters work great, so I really just had to smooth out the petals a little bit before forming my flowers. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I sure do appreciate a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you get notified when I publish future videos. To add my flowers to the vase, I'm just using the same glue to attach the petals individually, and then I'm adding a dot of clay in the center to form the center of the flower. Finally, I'll add some finishing touches by making some lines from the center of the petals outward. This just gives a little bit of a more realistic look. On the second vase, I'm going to be sculpting a daisy, and I don't have any clay cutters for this, so I'll just be doing it freehand, which is going to be a little more time consuming. I'm going to make my daisy oversized and place it right in the middle of the vase, so I'm going to start by making the petals. The petals of this daisy are going to be slightly elongated and not quite a teardrop shape, but similar. I found that as I went along, it was easiest to roll the clay into a ball and make several balls of equal size to then form them into petals. That way I knew more or less my petals were going to be of similar size. Once again, I'll use glue to attach the petals individually to the vase. The glue doesn't dry immediately, so it's easy to shift some petals around if you need to. As a final step, I'm using my needle tool to add some texture to the center of the flower and also some lines on each of the petals. I love the look of clay roses, so I thought it'd be fun to create a simple rose for the front of this terrazzo vase. I'll start by flattening out a small rectangle of clay, and this is going to be the center of the rose. So once it's nice and flat, I'm going to take one end and just gently curl it inward. This is going to create a coiled effect that looks like the inside of a rose. Next, I'm going to take my ball modeling tool and create some petals. This helps smooth out the petal to make it a little bit thinner. And I'm just going to go petal by petal and start wrapping these around my center coil. You can start to see how our rose is taking shape, so I'll just continue until I have a rose that I think is full enough. Then to attach it to the vase, I'm going to shave a little bit of clay off the back because this ended up being pretty thick. Then I'll use my glue to attach it to the center of the vase. It took about a day for the clay to dry because it wasn't very thick, so then it was time to get to the fun part of painting our designs. I'm going to start with our tall daisy vase because it's the simplest to paint. I'm just using a white acrylic paint here. And this paint is a little bit older, so I did notice I needed to water it down a little bit for it to adhere to the clay. One tip I'm going to share in a moment is sealing your air dry clay before painting, and sometimes that helps to get a smoother application. Then I'm going to add some yellow in the center, and this is really going to make this flower pop. I love how it looks against that ombre background, and the texture of the clay that we used with the needle tool is really coming through now. Then to add just a touch of extra detail, I'm going to take a lime green and mix it in with some yellow to paint the center of the flower a little bit greenish, because that's how a daisy would actually look. Then I'm going to take a deeper shade of brown mixed with my white paint to add some depth to these petals as well. To make my design a little more durable, I'm going to take some Mod Podge and add it as a top coat all over the daisy. For the last two vases, I started with a base coat of Mod Podge because I wanted to seal the clay a little bit more to help my paint adhere better, and I found that this really prevented the paint from being absorbed by the clay. I'm starting with a blush pink. I love this color. It's a matte acrylic paint, so it's not shiny, and I really ended up liking this look. I haven't worked with these paints a lot. I'll link them in the description box. I just felt like it looked like a really nice, almost watercolor finish on this clay. To give the flower a little more depth, I mixed in some red paint with my blush pink and added it to the center of the flower. For the last vase, again, I'm starting with that base coat of Mod Podge before painting the flowers a light pink. I think those clay cutters for the flowers worked out so well, and I can't wait to try it with some polymer clay, so I think I'm going to post a video sometime soon for that. Again, I'm taking a slightly darker shade to add some depth to the petals of the flowers where we made little creases with the needle tool before. After painting the centers of the flowers, I went ahead and started on the vine using a combination of brown and a lighter shade of tan. This is where really fine point paintbrushes come in handy because it was really hard to get into those little spaces where the vine met the vase. So you can see here I had to use a tiny brush to make sure that I didn't paint over the vase. Finally, I was able to paint the leaves in a pretty green matte paint, and I think this just adds a nice complement to the pink flowers. I really like the way this turned out. It's always hard to choose paint colors when it gets to this stage, so I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Now it's time to vote on which of these vases is your favorite. Leave me a comment down below to let me know. Also, don't forget that my friends over at Sustain My Craft Habit are sharing their craft challenge, so be sure to check out the link down in the description box. I'll also leave some videos that I think you might enjoy right here. I'll see you next time.